Hello, listeners. I'm Hallie.
And I'm Brittany.
And thank you for jumping back into the abyss with us today. We are very excited about this week's episode. We're going to be doing something a little bit different from what we normally do. Today, we're going to be talking about 3 different cases, and they're all going to be based on cruise ship disappearances. Throughout this week on our social media, we have a new post every day of a cruise ship disappearance case that we don't mention in this episode. We found so many different cases that were interesting and important to talk about, but obviously we can't squeeze them all into this little episode, so we decided to spend the entire week posting a new case every day to raise awareness about these people's disappearances and to raise awareness about the investigative measures taken by cruise ship owners and companies. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Give us that 5-star rating. We really enjoy doing this for you and researching and recording, and we want to know that you are enjoying our episodes as much as we are enjoying making them for you. Also, don't forget to check out our website during our Abyss episodes. Go to theabysspod.com, and under episodes, we have a post for every single case we talk about, and if you click on them, there's going to be a bunch of pictures that can help you visualize the case better, even see some CCTV footage. We've been doing a lot of cases lately with CCTV footage, so make sure to go check it out. Definitely with this episode and having 3 different cases we're going to address, it's going to be very good to have that visual divider. Also, because we are addressing disappearances, it's always good to have that image in your mind of what the person looks like and to even just go and look, and you may have already made a connection just from the picture itself without even listening to our story. So this can help in recovering their body or discovering what may have happened to them. If they aren't dead, where are they today, kind of thing. So please go and check out our website. It's not only important for you as a listener, but it's also beneficial to the case itself.
Over 20 million people embark on cruises every single year. It's a $126 billion industry and still growing. Ships sail all over the world. They offer passengers food and drinks and fun and exotic destinations. And many of these ships are like cities on the water. There's clubs and restaurants and shopping, water parks, spas, anything you could think of. Although to many, cruises may sound like endless food and fun in the sun, cruises can have a darker side too. Between 2000 and 2014, over 200 people went missing off of cruise ships. These cases are often very hard to get definitive answers to because the vast ocean is really good at keeping secrets. Today, we will be discussing cruise ship disappearances.
So let's put on our masks and dive down into the abyss. Our first case we are going to discuss today is about a woman named Rebecca Coriam. She was born on March 11th in 1987 in Chester, England. She was raised with 2 foster brothers in a loving family, and she was just a very adventurous girl. She worked at the Chester Zoo for a while she was younger, and she later joined the British Cadet and studied sports science at Plymouth University. Rebecca realized she enjoyed working with children and decided to explore that passion of hers. In June 2020, Rebecca traveled to London to interview for a job opening on a Disney cruise. Her goals were achieved when she got hired as a new member of the team and was sent to Florida for training. The regular schedule for crew members is to spend about 4 to 6 months working on the ship and then taking 2 to 6 months for time off. Rebecca's first contract went extremely well, and she took her 2 months off to go back to England and see her family. When she returned to work, she went to Los Angeles to board with the Disney Wonder. This was going to be a cruise ship that went down towards the Mexican ports. While working for Disney Wonder, Rebecca did programs with the children, exactly what she was hoping to pursue. But unfortunately, her grandfather happened to pass away during her time with the Disney Wonder ship, and she took 2 weeks off to travel back home to England once again. Even though Rebecca would remain in contact with her family through Skype and FaceTime, normal phone calls, her grandfather's funeral would be the last time her family was able to see her in person.
On March 21st, 2011, Rebecca sent a message to her parents that she'd be calling them the following day to catch up and see how they were doing. But the 22nd arrived and the call never came. At 9 a.m. on the 22nd, Rebecca did not show up for her shift at work, so crew members started to search for her in the usual spots, but no one could find her. They checked her room, they checked the pool, all of the common areas where employees would hang out, but she was nowhere to be found. She was paged over the intercom system, but still no word from her. And oddly, one unnamed crew member allegedly made the claim that Rebecca had gone overboard around 3 a.m. This prompted crews to look at the CCTV footage and see if they could spot her anytime after that or see what happened. And they did end up seeing her on this footage around 5:45 a.m. So they knew that she hadn't gone over at 3. On the footage, Rebecca can be seen talking on an internal phone, so a phone that only went to other phones on the cruise ship. And she was in a designated crew area. In the footage, she appears to be very upset. And you can see an image from this footage on our website and see what you think. Another crew member walked up to her and asked if she was okay, and she said she was fine. She hung up the phone and walked off. This narrowed the time frame for what could have happened to Rebecca to between 5:45 and 9 a.m. And because they hadn't seen her, the crew became extremely concerned and set off to thoroughly search the ship and try to find her. The cruise ship employees contacted the U.S. Coast Guard and the Mexican Navy to keep an eye out for her in the waters that the ship had traveled through. But because the cruise ship was registered in the Bahamas, the Royal Bahamas Police took the lead over the FBI or even the Mexican Navy. Once the ship was back docked in Los Angeles, a Royal Bahamas detective flew out to conduct an investigation. Reportedly, this detective only interviewed a couple of crew members and none of the passengers. He didn't really look around the ship that much, and just sort of took a couple of days and then left. Rebecca's parents were notified of her disappearance and flew out to LA to see what they could do about helping the investigation and getting answers. And they claimed the cruise ship tried to keep them totally hidden. They didn't want other passengers to know what had happened, and they really wanted to keep it under wraps. So allegedly, they transported Rebecca's parents in a blacked out car. They took them in and out through a side entrance so other people couldn't see them, and just generally tried to keep them out of view of other passengers. Unfortunately, there was very little in the way of answers for Rebecca's family.
In October 2011, a journalist for The Guardian named John Ronson decided to dig into Rebecca's case on his own. He took Wonder on the same route as Rebecca during the time of her disappearance. He would talk to crew members about the incident, but overall, he tried to remain pretty low profile. It was insinuated that both Disney and the detectives from the Bahamas knew more than they let on, and John Ronson concluded that he believes Rebecca most likely slipped while running on the track and just fell overboard. The railings are pretty low, but there are many security cameras in the area. Is the footage from that day being withheld to prevent negative publicity or lawsuits? We don't really know, but it is a theory that Ronson believes to be plausible. The captain's theory about Rebecca's disappearance is that a rogue wave may have come over and washed her off of the ship while she was at the cruise pool area. This is a shaky theory considering the walls in the area are very high. Another member of the crew supported that she went overboard at the crew pool, stating, quote, "Everyone knows it," end quote. We have a photo up on our website of the cruise ship crew pool. So if you want to go check it out, you can kind of make your own assessment of what you believe might have happened if this was plausible, and let us know what you think about that whole theory. Someone from the company was also reported to have placed flowers on the wall near the crew pool in honor of Rebecca Coriam. The journalist Ronson checked out this widely accepted theory while he was on the ship and found out that there were a lot of cameras all around the area. So it would have been documented in some sort of way that this wave came on board or that she had gotten knocked off. It is speculated that if she did go over near the crew pool, that Disney knows about it and just hasn't said anything. Not to mention that the railings were pretty high and would be very difficult to jump or climb over, and much less even fall over. As far as regulations go, it's not acceptable for crew members to be on the deck during rough conditions. Some past crew members had even been fired for being on the deck during rougher conditions, since it is such a hazard. So if Rebecca was out by the crew pool during super rough conditions, she would have known that it was against the rules. And since she was a British cadet, you would think following rules and regulations and safety was pretty important to her. So it seems unrealistic to me that she would be out on the crew pool during such hazardous sea conditions. But it doesn't end there. A pair of slippers were also found discovered near the pool and were said to have belonged to Rebecca, but a friend said that they weren't her size or her style, so it wasn't possible for them to belong to her. Another thing that really throws me off about that is that if a wave had come up and washed her off, don't you think it could have taken the slippers too?
Yeah, that is a really strange aspect to it. Because if it was rough condition, she wouldn't just like take her shoes off and, dip in the pool or something like that. Like, if she was out there, it wasn't for relaxation or anything. It was, it's just very odd. Rebecca's family was super frustrated with the lack of information that they were getting, so they decided to take matters into their own hands and hire a PI agency. The PIs noticed a few key points. First off, those notorious slippers found, like we said, were not Rebecca's size. They were way too small, so it's not even like oversized slippers or something like that. They were too small. They also had another crew member's name and cabin number on them. This is so strange, and it really makes me wonder how they ever thought the slippers were hers in the first place. They had someone else's name on them, someone else's cabin number, they were someone else's size, and they weren't even her style. So
it seems that someone just really jumped to conclusions on it and didn't really analyze the situation as a whole.
Yeah, for sure. It was also noted that the clothes Rebecca was wearing in the CCTV footage were way too big for her. You can kind of see this in the picture on our website. They were hanging off of her and not her normal fitted clothing. Her parents think this footage could have been evidence that Rebecca was sexually or otherwise assaulted, and they theorized that she may have just thrown on someone else's clothes to make a hasty exit from someone else's cabin or whatever bad situation she was in. They also believe that Disney knows a lot more than they're letting on, and they're trying to cover it up. Investigators looked at sea conditions the night that Rebecca allegedly went overboard and found that they were actually pretty calm. There wasn't any notable storms or rough conditions in the area. There was a lot of criticism over the way that Disney handled this investigation, and the family was really upset that they were never kept in the loop and that Bahamian authorities had been called over the FBI or someone more qualified. The Bahamian authorities were said to have made no real effort in investigating Rebecca's disappearance, and they were kind of infamous for being ineffective and kind of lax with their investigative efforts.
Now we are going to jump to some of the theories specifically involved with Rebecca Coriam's case. At the end of the episode, we will discuss overall theories that could be involved with all three of the cases and many more cruise ship disappearance cases, but these ones specifically relate to Rebecca Coriam's. The first theory is that a wave washed her overboard. We've already talked about this, and we believe it most likely would have been caught on any security cameras, not to mention that the seas were calm that night. Taking another turn, some believe that she may have been trafficked. The day before the anniversary of Rebecca's disappearance, a woman contacted Rebecca's father and claimed that they were 85% sure that they saw her in Venice, Italy. However, Rebecca did not have her passport on her when she went missing and wouldn't have a reason to be in Italy in the first place. Could this support the theory that she is a victim of human trafficking? Some speculate that Rebecca committed suicide, but this is pretty much ruled out. She was a happy go-getter and even had been planning a trip to Disneyland in Paris. However, we saw on The Sun, which is a tabloid that we don't consider to be extremely accurate or trustworthy, that a woman claimed to be a romantic partner of Rebecca's, and Rebecca was super upset since the woman decided to go back to her boyfriend. It is stated that this could have caused her to commit suicide. However, Rebecca seemed really close to her family, and I assume that they would have mentioned if she started to act strange in any sort of way, as if contemplating self-harm. But there has been no mention of her change in behavior at all. And even though we don't really trust the Sun tabloid, we do feel that it was an important piece of information to provide to our listeners. A member of Parliament, Chris Matheson, who represented Chester, England, believes that Rebecca was a victim of crime, since it is not uncommon due to the shady circumstances involving cruise ships and international borders. There are different laws that go on within each country, and some are more strict than others. Jurisdiction can get hazy, so it makes solving a crime on a cruise ship that much more complicated. Hopefully, a conclusion can come to Rebecca Coriam's case. If you have any information, please inform law enforcement. And now we will lead into the next case of Li Ying Li.
Li Ying Li, who went by the English name Angie, was a 36-year-old Chinese immigrant that lived in Dublin, Ireland with her husband, Daniel Belling. Angie had opened a wedding planning business in 2015 called Cinderella's Wedding. It catered towards other Chinese women planning their weddings, and she really thrived in this industry. She enjoyed what she did and helping women plan their big day. Her husband, Daniel Belling, was a German IT consultant working for Apple, and the couple had 2 children, aged 6 and 4. Angie and Daniel's marriage had been strained, and in 2017, they decided to take a family cruise to see if they could work things out or if it was time to just part ways. So on February 9th, 2017, they set off on an 11-day cruise on the MSC Magnifica out of Rome, Italy. The ship was set to stop in ports in Italy, Greece, and Malta, so they were set to have a really good time. Cruises often use key cards as a way for passengers to pay for drinks or track who goes on and off the ship at any given time. And this was important when the cruise was over and passengers disembarked to get back to their busy lives after the vacation, because crew members noticed that there was a discrepancy between how many passengers had gotten on the ship and how many had gotten off. They noticed someone had boarded the ship that never swiped to leave.
The cruise ship staff looked at the records and saw that Daniel and their 2 kids were accounted for, but Angie was not. In fact, no one could recall seeing her after the second day of the cruise. Daniel was found at the airport, returning home to Dublin from Rome, and told law enforcement that he had done nothing wrong. He said that Angie had gotten tired of the cruise and wanted to leave. After their conversation, their cruise ship stopped in Katakolan, Greece. Angie stayed on the ship while Daniel and the kids left the ship for sightseeing, and when they returned from their full day of activities, Daniel noticed that Angie and all of her belongings were gone. He didn't feel like this was necessary to report because she often walked away and left during family vacations, and he just figured it was another incident like that. He told the maid to only make up 3 of the beds because his wife would not be returning to the ship, and this was confirmed by the maid. The following day, Daniel tried to call Angie and check in, but she did not answer her telephone. Daniel told law enforcement that Angie had a business meeting in Greece and then later assumed that she fled back to China. However, her mother and her family denies her return. The judge did not buy Daniel's story. He said Daniel was suspicious and could easily flee. Not to mention that there was no record or CCTV footage of Angie's departure from the ship. It was decided by the judge to hold Daniel in custody with no bail.
Law enforcement interviewed ship staff. This included a shop owner who had a distinct memory of the couple. The shop owner said that he had witnessed Daniel berating Angie about her shoes and telling her to shut up. Another crew member had an on account as well. They said that on the night of February 15th, they had found one of the Belling children wandering around the decks. I would take this next piece with a grain of salt, but some reports say that police interviewed the children, and they claim that one night Daniel had told them to stay in the cabin while he took their mother out of the room, and when he returned, it was alleged that Angie was not with him and they never saw her again. This could be somewhat hyped up for the tabloids, but it's an interesting account. About a month later in March, a gruesome discovery was made in the Italian port of Rimini. A suitcase was found, and inside of it was the body of an Asian female. This body appeared to be extremely malnourished and had possibly died of starvation. Horrifically, this woman was likely put into the suitcase alive, however barely. Initially, this was thought to be Angie, but that was soon ruled out when physical traits were compared. Angie was a different height from the found woman, and the area that the suitcase was found in wouldn't make sense with where the cruise ship Angie was on went through. This was later confirmed with DNA to prove it was not Angie. As for the identity of this woman in the suitcase, it has not been confirmed, but there's a lot of garment factories in Italy that employ Chinese immigrants. Some are less than humane, so a lot of the theories are that she came from one of those and was just disposed of. But this find really brought a lot of attention back to Angie's case and sort of hyped it up in the news again. Angie's mother says that she really has no idea what could have happened, but she does have an idea of what did not happen. She said, although Angie and Daniel had fought often in their marriage, and that she had seen bruises on her daughter from where Daniel had grabbed her, she doesn't think he had anything to do with her disappearance. She said, quote, "I have a very good relationship with Daniel. He's a very good person, and I don't think that he could have hurt my daughter." End quote. She also states she does not think Angie would have committed suicide and that she would not have willingly left her children. Neighbors of the couple described them as odd. One neighbor came across Daniel sleeping in a stairwell one night after Angie had kicked him out. So clearly the marriage was tumultuous.
I have a hard time believing what Angie's mother has said, just because you're never fully in a relationship, and that's how a lot of abusive relationships get away with it, is there's a show put on when they're around other people or other family members, and it's pretty much hidden. So I don't really believe that she can 100% say that it wasn't possible for foul play to happen or domestic violence.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, you really never know everything going on in a relationship. And she had seen her with bruises, neighbors had heard them fighting, and it really only takes one time where it goes too far for things to take a turn like this. It really just takes that one event to push it over the edge. So you never know for sure.
Daniel ended up being held on suspicion of murder. In Italy, a suspect can be held up to a year to provide enough time for a proper investigation. An extension on his custody was applied for and granted, and he wasn't released until April 2018. Throughout his time held by law enforcement in Italy, he continued to maintain his innocence. He was adamant about getting back to his children, and Daniel had no legal history of violence, and with the lack of evidence, they ended up accepting his version of events and released him. However, shortly after his release, Daniel was indicted on mortgage fraud that he had previously committed. During Daniel's trial, an Irish psychologist came forward and said that in 2013, Angie had mentioned being tired of Dublin. She wanted to leave Daniel and her kids to move back to China. If Angie had moved back to China, why was the key card not used to disembark? Why was she not contacting her family? Or maybe she has and they're covering up for her. We've seen that many times before. Or why was her passport not used? There's so many questions to her fleeing back to China and just abandoning her kids that seem to make it uncertain.
And if we're to believe Daniel's version of events, he wasn't really stopping her from going, or, I mean, he may have had some reluctance to letting her go, but he basically stated it like she told him she was tired of the cruise and he was like, all right, and they just parted ways. So if she wasn't in an abusive relationship where he had complete control over her or something like that, she could have just left and used normal means and not gone through all this secrecy and trouble of, you know, getting a new passport or sneaking off the ship or something like that. She could have just simply walked away. So if she did go of her own volition, there has to be a reason she wanted to be hidden. One theory put out is that Angie may have committed suicide. This is a common one for cruise ship disappearances. And it's really hard to tell what goes on in the mind of someone else and where they're at mentally. So it's impossible to be completely sure that someone is not in that state of mind. But still, it didn't seem plausible to her family or Daniel or anyone like that she would have done that. Foul play is another theory in this case. And it ranges from the obvious that her husband may have done it to the more mysterious, like a stranger. Angie was allegedly, possibly seeing an Irish man and having an affair. So there's theories that maybe she decided to just start over with someone new and run away with him. Or maybe she changed her mind and he killed her or something like that. There's also a theory out there that I've seen Daniel voice support for, that she may have faked her death just to frame him and kind of ruin his life because she hated him that much. Many believe Angie is still alive and simply snuck off the ship, or did swipe to get off the ship and it was just a coincidental computer glitch, but I find that kind of hard to believe that the one passenger to not swipe is the one that was never seen again. I think it would be pretty astronomical for her to have gone off the ship and swiped the card and had that one computer glitch and then just disappear into thin air. But whatever happened to Angie will likely remain a mystery unless she or someone who knows what happened came forward to set the record straight.
The last case we're going to discuss with you today is on a man named George Allen Smith IV. He was born on October 3rd, 1978, making him 26 years old during the time of the cruise ship vacation. George was described as funny and well-liked by his friends and family. He liked to party with his friends and meet new people, super extroverted. George attended college as a business major and was very interested in web design. His father owned a liquor store, which George worked at, and he was even planning to take it over later in life. In 2002, George started dating the love of his life, Jennifer Hagel. She was pursuing a career as an elementary school teacher and seemed to fit into George's life perfectly. During a trip to Aruba in 2004, George proposed to Jennifer. After their wedding, they decided to go on a 2-week Mediterranean cruise called Brilliance of the Seas with Royal Caribbean for their honeymoon. They departed from Barcelona on June 29th, 2005. Shortly into the journey, a neighbor of George and Jennifer Smith's room went to the front desk to complain about loud noises and partying that was keeping him up at night. He did this in hopes that something could be done about all of the ruckus that George and his wife were causing. While celebrating and enjoying their time on the cruise ship, George and Jennifer met a guy named Josh Askin and 4 other boys named Zach, Jeffrey, and Gregory Rosenberg, who were from Russia, and Rusty Kaufman, who was a close friend to the 3 Russian boys. The Rosenberg boys and Rusty had loud, flashy personalities. They got into trouble a lot on the cruise ship for smoking cigarettes in the hot tub and a number of other things. They had a complete disregard for others and cruise ship rules. On July 24th, they took a shore excursion in Mykonos, Greece, and that same day, an email was sent to George's family saying he was having a great time and not to contact him unless it was quote-unquote the end of the world or someone dying.
On the night of July 5th, Jennifer and George had a romantic dinner together, and then after this, they decided to go kind of live it up in the casino. Jennifer went to the blackjack tables, while George went to the craps table and met up with Josh, who taught him how to play. Eventually, the casino manager, Lloyd Botha, joined the party. According to Josh, Lloyd started making moves on Jennifer, and she was hanging all over him. They had all been drinking a lot at this point, so things were starting to kind of take a turn for the worse. George and Josh decided to make a run to George's cabin to grab some more money and to take some shots of absinthe. By this time, George was already pretty drunk, and when they got back to the casino, he was boasting about how he had $17,000 in cash in his room. Several passengers remember hearing these brags, but it seemed that the dollar amount varied a lot with each account. Sometimes it was $15,000, sometimes it was more. So it's hard to tell if this was just kind of drunk bragging or if he had maybe won this from the casino, or it could have just been a lie to impress people. That's what his family kind of believes, that he didn't really have this money, but he just thought it made him seem kind of cool to brag about it. If he did win the money in the casino, there are probably records of this and footage, as if you've ever been to a casino, you know how heavily monitored they are. There's always cameras everywhere. There's people watching all the time just to make sure no one's cheating, no one's stealing, anything like that. So I feel like these records would have been pretty straightforward, but we haven't seen anything like that. Either way, this definitely could have started attracting the wrong type of attention. After midnight, the Smiths, Josh, Rusty, and the Rosenbergs all still wanted to keep the party rolling. They had the absinthe with them, and when the casino closed, they moved to the disco. Allegedly, it was at this point that George finally had enough of the flirting going on between Jennifer and Lloyd. A fight ensued that may have gone as far as Jennifer kicking George in the groin and storming off. Around 3:30 a.m., the disco closed down, and shortly before this, some reports say Jennifer had left with Lloyd or that she had simply wandered off by herself. George was too drunk to stand, let alone walk to his room at this point, so Josh and Rusty and 2 of the Rosenbergs helped George back to his room. The key card indicates that they opened the room about 3:52 a.m. When they did not see Jennifer in the room, they decided to clean George up a little bit, change his shirt, and then make a lap in the solarium to see if they could find Jennifer. When they had no luck, they dragged George back to his room and put him in bed. Again, this is sort of confirmed because the keycard was used to open the room at 4:02 a.m.
Next door, a police chief named Cletus Hyman heard weird noises coming from the Smiths' room. He heard a lot of cheering, yelling, and knocking around. It got extremely loud 2 times until Hyman banged on the wall to let them know that he was irritated. Afterwards, he only heard some quieter quote-unquote party noises, and Hyman called in to complain to the ship. He was told that the source of the disturbance would be investigated and confronted. After calling the complaint, Hyman heard what sounded like one person in the hallway, possibly leaving the room. At about 4:15 a.m., Hyman heard more voices out on the balcony and said it sounded like an argument, but not necessarily a fight. Following that, he heard what sounded like someone being ushered out of the room and someone saying, "Good night, good night, good night." Hyman heard the door close and decided to poke his head out into the hallway, be a little eavesdropper, which, as we learned from this case, we all should be, apparently. And he saw 3 men walking away from the room. After 5 a.m., the boys' key cards show that they were in their respective rooms, and they even placed an order for room service. Hyman's investigative instincts were on high alert, and he continued to eavesdrop. And this is when things took a turn for the weird. He heard banging cabinets, which lasted for about 8 minutes before hearing the movement change to the balcony. There were 2 metal chairs on all the balconies, and Hyman recalls hearing one of the chairs move. Everything remained silent for a minute or two. Between 4:20 a.m. and 4:25, Hyman heard a large thud that was so hefty that he felt the vibrations in his bed. Initially, he thought someone may have fallen on the balcony, not off of it, but just on it. Then he remembered hearing a lot of furniture moving, and he thought maybe someone was throwing their furniture off of the balcony. And 3 to 4 minutes after the thud, 2 crew members responded to his noise complaint, but they heard nothing from outside in the hall, so they left without ever entering the Smiths' room. Cletus Hyman decided to try and get some sleep at that point, since the noises had started subsiding, and it seemed that the group of partiers had finally separated for the night. Neighbors on the other side of the Smiths' room later agreed to hearing the exact same noises that Hyman had noted, but they hadn't seen anything at all. They said that 2 out of 3 of the voices even sounded like they had an accent, which is really interesting considering that the 3 Rosenberg boys were Russian.
That night, Jennifer had made it to the deck where her stateroom was, but was too drunk to find her way to the actual cabin. It has even been theorized that she maybe had been drugged, but she had been drinking and partying a lot, so it's hard to tell what was a normal tolerance for her and what was kind of over the top. Ultimately, she passed out in a hallway and was later found by crew members. The crew member that found her put a wet paper towel on her forehead on advice from the ship nurse, and she woke up but was still a little disoriented. She could tell the employee her name and stateroom, so 2 other crew members that had arrived decided to head up to the room and see if there was anyone there that could come and tend to her. They went to her cabin, opening the door at 4:48 a.m. They peeked in the room and the bathroom, but didn't see anyone there, so they just went and got a wheelchair and escorted Jennifer back to her room, keying back in at 4:57. The staff members put her on the bed and left. They didn't see anything out of the ordinary. There was no blood, nothing amiss beyond normal sort of mess. But they also saw no sign of George. When the crew members left the Smith's cabin, Hyman poked his head out to complain about the noises again. They told him that no one was in there now, that they had just been in, and everything seemed quiet, and they headed on. Jennifer slept till about 8 a.m., and still in the dress from the night before, she just slipped on some flip-flops and decided to head down to the spa. She and George had a couple massage scheduled for 10 a.m., but for whatever reason, she decided to head down around 8:30. She didn't see George anywhere and just kind of assumed he had slept in another cabin that night. He had done that previously on this trip, so she didn't really think much of it at that point.
Around 8:30 a.m., a large blood stain was noted on an awning by many vacationers. A team took a photo of the blood stain, and we have that up on our website if you want to see it, theabysspod.com. If you go and check it out, you'll kind of see it's not just a little bit, it's a pretty large amount of blood. Crew members checked all the rooms around the general area of the blood stain to determine if everyone was accounted for. Considering that they were docked, many people had already used their sea pass to exit the ship and explore, making their whereabouts known, so they were quickly able to realize that George Smith's whereabouts were unaccounted for. The crew went to their cabin and sealed the room for investigation at 8:50 a.m., And crew members even took some photos around the room of suspected blood. It was later determined, though, that this suspected blood they had photographed ended up being makeup. However, there was blood on the balcony railing, as if someone was holding on before they fall. This is also on our website for you to check out. The crew attempted to find Jennifer and saw she was registered for a massage that morning. Jennifer seemed really shocked at all the information that they told her and said that she didn't remember anything from the night before. She stated that it was possible that George could have slept somewhere else because they had been out partying and drinking, and as we already stated, it wasn't unusual. George was paged over the ship's intercom, but he never showed up. Royal Caribbean Sea Pass program ensured that George Smith had not disembarked at their location in Turkey, and due to the gravity of the situation, a crew member named Marie tried to help Jennifer during this confusing moment. They went to the gift shop and gathered a change of clothes for Jennifer to help her be a little bit more comfortable since she was still in the outfit she was wearing the night before. She hadn't brushed her teeth, and with all the stress going on, her not being able to go back into her cabin at the moment, they were trying to make her more comfortable during the crisis. At 12:30 a.m., the Turkish authorities arrived on the ship and were ready to conduct an investigation since they had initial jurisdiction before the FBI. They immediately wanted to take Josh Askin and Jennifer Smith in for questioning. They considered both of them suspects at the moment and left the ship with 2 officers and Turkish authorities to be questioned. During this process, Josh tried to point the finger at Lloyd Botha, but Lloyd's girlfriend said she was in the room with him and he couldn't have been responsible for anything. Interestingly, the 3 Rosenberg boys and their friend Rusty were not questioned about the night's event. Jennifer also stated that their drinking was, quote, not to the point of something of this nature should ever happen, end quote. And that seems so strange to me. Not only were they drinking absinthe all night long, but she ended up passing out in a hallway. How is that not irresponsible alcoholic intake? After Jennifer contacted her parents to inform them of what was going on, her father called George's parents to inform them, and he started the conversation with, quote, something terrible has happened to George, end quote. This is eerily similar to the Christina Watson case, and if you haven't heard it, we have an episode on it, and it's insane. We read so many court documents revolving this case, but needless to say, the same type of third-person explanation happened to Christina Watson's parents, rather than hearing it from her husband, who was there when the incident occurred.
Josh, Rusty, and the Rosenbergs partied on and on over the next few days, and they all got in trouble repeatedly. The Rosenbergs' parents were talked to on multiple occasions regarding their son's behavior. These included incidents of cursing at crew members, smoking in non-smoking areas, and later, Rusty and the Rosenbergs were even accused of raping a young woman. The boys claimed it was consensual, even producing a tape of the encounter as evidence, but the cruise ship staff had just had enough. Between behavioral issues and being named in the George Smith incident, staff and passengers alike were just fed up with the boys. The Rosenberg families, including Rusty and Josh Askin and his family, were all asked to leave the ship and subsequently escorted off. George Smith's case was handed over to the FBI, and the Turkish police and cruise ship handed over their respective files on the case. Police say that Josh's lawyer pulled them aside and told them to look at Greg Rosenberg specifically, but the lawyer later denies that this ever happened. He does say that his client had left the party and had nothing to do with any murder. He says he was with the others when the room service was ordered, and the lawyer also thinks that the ship is lying about their logs, a claim that Royal Caribbean obviously denies. Unfortunately, there's no known footage where it would really count in this case. George's family says that Royal Caribbean refused to give them the contents of his room. This isn't really that odd considering it's an ongoing investigation, and if they believe foul play is suspected, they would keep all that stuff for evidence. But the incident has not officially been ruled a homicide. No suspects have officially been named, and Josh invoked his Fifth Amendment right that protects against self-incrimination at an inquest about what happened on basically every single question. In a statement made by Royal Caribbean, they said that they kept the family of George Smith up to date with all information until Bree Smith, his sister, told them to stop. Jennifer goes back and forth on what she says she believes happened. Sometimes she says she thinks that it was an accident, while others she seems sure that it's murder. She even allegedly told the family while preparing a lawsuit that, quote unquote, we can't let them get away with murder. Jennifer has repeatedly stated that she was lied to and manipulated by cruise staff. She claims that the investigation was severely mishandled and that the ship never should have left Turkey without a full investigation. She said, quote, "It seems an abundance of evidence and many important clues sailed away that evening with the cruise ship, as opposed to being uncovered by the FBI, who did not board the ship until 2 days later," end quote.
According to George's family, there are plenty of key mistakes during and following the investigation. George's family says that absinthe was not proven to be consumed or in the room. They also stated that they believe there were really 3 crew members in the room with George rather than 3 of the friends that he had made on the boat. And they believe that the crew members wanted the money that he had been bragging about to Lloyd Botha. And so since Lloyd ran the casino, he obviously had it in with crew members, and they believe this is how it went down. The family also claims that someone told them there was blood all over the room and the hall, but obviously the photos conflict with this statement. Another obvious opinion of the family is that Jennifer is suspicious. They stated that an ear and eye witness put a woman's voice in or near George's vicinity during the time of the thud, along with a woman's scream afterwards. However, this was not mentioned by Cletus Hyman, who gave a very detailed description of everything he heard that night, especially since he was already on edge after complaining about it multiple times. You know that he was really attentive and alert. More reasons that the family is on edge about Jennifer is that she canceled everything of George's 2 weeks after the incident. I feel like that's a very short time to start canceling things like that, although no matter what, a man overboard after 2 weeks is most likely not alive. Jennifer also supposedly manipulated George's parents to becoming the executor of his estate, and she persuaded the court to declare him officially deceased. Jennifer also supposedly manipulated George's parents to become the executor of his estate, and she persuaded the court to declare him officially deceased. This was not what the parents had wanted, and they even lost part of the settlement because of this. A lawsuit was ensued and settled against the cruise ship, and Jennifer ended up cutting his family completely out of the lawsuit and blocked their discovery efforts. In January 2015, the FBI put an end to the investigation, even though they had 97,000 documents relating to the case. A $100,000 reward was put up by either the family or Jennifer. We have read it both ways, but figured we would just state them both since it's not completely sure. The family filed an appeal to the public and government to reopen the investigation and give it another really good look over. Overall, it is theorized that George could have been robbed and killed after boasting about the amount of cash that he contained inside of his room on the ship. This is logical considering he was in the casino, and there could have been somebody who overheard him and saw an opportunity for big bucks. Usually people in casinos are trying to make some big bucks. It is also possible that he could have been loopy from the absinthe and accidentally fell over the railing. However, it doesn't quite explain the blood that was everywhere, especially on the railing itself.
Yeah, for the amount of blood there, it's pretty much sure that George had to be bleeding when he went over the railing and that he had to have sat there for enough time for that blood to collect there. It wasn't just a quick thud and then he's gone. That kind of limits the options there a little bit.
Yeah, even if you consider him being so drunk and on a ship that maybe he fell over and hit his head and was bleeding, there would be some type of DNA evidence in the room that would point towards him falling and hitting his head prior, but they didn't find any other blood traces in the bedroom itself that we know of. If you have any tips regarding George Smith's case and would like to come forward anonymously, then you can call 1-844-651-1936, or you can just call 911 with any statements that you may have. They're always there to help you and willing to take tips.
So that pretty much wraps up the 3 cases that we were covering in this episode, and we wanted to talk a little bit about theories surrounding these cases as a whole and pretty much all cruise ship disappearances. Like we said earlier, cruise ship disappearances only really have so many logical conclusions. Foul play by someone known to the victim is always a possibility. People on cruises often lose some, if not all, of their inhibitions and kind of let loose, which may put them in more dangerous situations. I think a lot of people think that they can go buck wild on these enclosed places and not have to worry about the same things that they would downtown in a city. But unfortunately, there are still many things that can go wrong on a cruise ship. Sometimes this wild abandon leads to people simply falling overboard, Theft and sexual assault are not uncommon, and sometimes these can be taken to a deadly level. Some people may also think of it as the perfect way to dispose of someone. If they go overboard, the ship can be hundreds of miles away in a matter of hours, and often investigations are not as thorough as we would hope. Cruise ships may be a somewhat popular thought for suicide as well. There are definitely a lot of theories surrounding cruise ships being used for human trafficking as well. I think a lot of us are familiar with the Amy Lynn Bradley case, and I know that this was a really popular theory for that case. The international nature and the lack of set or even followed regulations make the situation appealing for traffickers that want to disappear quickly with victims.
It also seems to be like a much easier method than doing it at airports or places like that, where traffickers would have to think about transporting the person they're kidnapping or things like that. But instead, they could just in their own country walk over and take foreign people who are unsuspecting and have their guard down and put them into this trafficking ring.
More complicated plots could also come about. Like we mentioned, the case involving Angie and her husband. There is some belief that she disappeared on purpose to frame her husband for her murder. That's a very convoluted plot, but stranger things have happened. It's really hard to tell with some of these cases. Even though the broad possibilities are kind of narrow, it's still almost never cut and dry what exactly took place. And with so many people and organizations and agencies having a vested interest in certain outcomes, it's really hard to know who to trust. I just think it's crazy in this day and age where everything is on camera all the time that there's so many blind spots in cruise ships where there's just no coverage, or this footage just sort of coincidentally disappears or is overwritten or something like that. It just seems like so many cases could just be immediately solved if there was just a little bit of footage. In 2013, 2 bills were introduced. The Cruise Line International Association introduced a Bill of Rights for cruise passengers, and the Cruise Ship Passenger Protection Act was also introduced. The former helps codify practices that will help with responses to crimes and disappearances, while the latter is meant to build transparency between cruise lines and consumers and give more federal authority to investigate. It also created a hotline for passengers for the cruise lines so they can get immediate assistance. It also made crime stats from cruise ships publicly available and created more victims advocates for the victims of crimes on cruise ships.
The fact that they had to pass an act for cruise ship disappearances just shows you how often and how common these things happen and how often they go unsolved, or cruise ships don't work cooperatively with law enforcement to get it solved because they don't want things to turn bad for them or to get pulled into a lawsuit. They would rather commit a crime instead of accessory.
Yeah, and it's not just for disappearances. Rates of sexual assault and theft on cruise ships are extremely high, and very few of them ever are solved or properly investigated. So we think of cruises as these like carefree kind of adventures, but in reality, the dangers of normal everyday life are there, but they are amplified because it's in a more enclosed space. There's more alcohol and recklessness and just people having their guard down. There's definitely a sense of security on there that's completely unfounded, unfortunately. Cruises can be so much fun, but it's super important to know your rights and ways of advocating for yourself if things go wrong. So before your next cruise, please make sure you're up to date with the laws and your course of action if something bad happens. There's even an app called the Cruise Ship Lawyer app, and you can download it and be prepared if something were to happen. You can have immediate professional advice and help manage that situation. So look into that if you're planning on going on a cruise when the whole pandemic is over. You just really need to be prepared to be your own advocate on a cruise, because so often authorities and the cruise ships themselves are not going to stand up for you. They're not going to investigate and do everything that needs to be done. So you need to be prepared to push that forward for you and your loved ones.
If you have any information about any of the cases we have discussed today, please report the information to law enforcement. Help out the families who are searching for their loved ones, and help out the people who have gone missing to return home to their families. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and subscribe. Go ahead and give us that 5-star rating. Make sure you're checking up on our Facebook page this week or our Instagram page. We're going to be posting one of those new cases every day for you to kind of read about and look into extra sources if you would like. They get really crazy. Some are more twisted and confusing than others, but they're still all very important, and I think it's a good way to keep these kind of scenarios in your mind and keep you aware of your surroundings at all times. It's a good reminder.
So thanks for jumping into the abyss with us.
See you next time.
Bye.
By the cruel pool. Yinglei. I just said elementary school.
I want to be in elementary school when I grow
want
up.
to be the school.
I thought the slippers were heard in the
Heard in the
heard in the
They
fur.
weren't even talking.
What?
Craps table. I don't know these terms, and that's funny. What do they do in a